Welcome, everyone, to the first workshop of the 2025 Research and Policy Symposium on Gender Equality in and Through Education, Bridging Policy and Practice, Advancing Gender-Responsive and Inclusive Pedagogy in Zimbabwe, which is led by Faith Nkala. My name is Samaya Mansour, and I'm a research associate on the gender team at the Center for Universal Education at Brookings, and I co-lead the Echidna Global Scholars Program with Senior Fellow and Deputy Director Jen O'Donoghue. As we get started, please take a minute to share in the chat your name, where you're joining us from, and which organization you're with. We also have a poll question for you to answer. Please select yes or no to the question you see on your screen. And just a few housekeeping reminders. We are recording this session and we'll be posting it to the symposium event page where it will be available to the public. So please know that your participation will be public. And please keep yourself muted and your video off until the breakout room portion of the workshop. If you want to ask a question, please type your name, your question, and who your question is for in the chat box. And if you want to comment on this workshop on social media, we invite you to use the Echidna Scholars hashtag. The goal of these workshops is to provide a space for a deep dive into the research of each of our 2025 Echidna Global Scholars. With the participation of both global and local experts, we hope to understand this research both as part of the broader conversation on this topic and within local contexts for policy and practice. In addition, we will provide space for all of you to meet, share, and learn with and from one another. But before we get started, I just want to share with you a bit about the Echidna Global Scholars Program. The program started in 2012, and it aims to strengthen the capacity of local leaders to drive evidence-based change in gender equality in and through education. It begins with a 6-month fellowship at Brookings, during which the scholars pursue individual research, focusing on improving learning opportunities and life outcomes for girls, young women, and gender non-conforming people in their local contexts. And upon the completion of the fellowship, the scholars transition to the alumni network, where we continue to work together collaboratively to promote significant, sustained, and collective influence on gender equality and education locally, regionally, and globally. And since its inception in 2012, the program hosted 14 cohorts of fellows, and it currently serves an alumni network of 48 scholars from 25 different countries. It's truly a privilege for us to get to spend our days learning with and from this group of powerful leaders. I also want to take advantage of this moment to let you all know that the applications for the 2026 cohort of the Echidna Global Scholars Program is now open through December 15. If you are or you know of someone who is a mid-career professional working in gender equality and education, and you're looking to expand your impact, please consider applying. So our agenda for this hour and a half is as follows. Echidna scholar Faith Nkala will present key findings and recommendations from her research, and then she'll engage you in breakout room discussions. We will be joined by 2 experts who will respond to her research, and after this, there will be an initial Q&A session with Faith and her discussants. And then we'll move into the more interactive portion of the workshop, in which we'll participate in breakout room discussions, and then return to share some of the highlights of our conversations, and we'll close the workshop together. But before we get started, allow me to introduce Faith Nkala. Faith brings 20 years of experience transforming education across Africa. As a director for Sub-Saharan Africa at Education Development Trust, she works closely with governments to strengthen teacher development and promote gender-inclusive classrooms where every child can thrive. A passionate advocate for girls' education and women's empowerment, Faith combines deep expertise with a collaborative approach that drives lasting change. And her leadership continues to shape policies and programs that ensure no learner is left behind. Faith, over to you.
Thank you, Samaya, for this amazing introduction. And colleagues, thank you for joining. I can feel the energy. I can see you all. Wherever you're joining from, thank you for making the time. I know It's end of year. There's so much happening. So I don't take it for granted that you have made time for you to be able to be with me today. And in the chat, I've seen where you're coming from. Thank you. And the poll is interesting. So we are in agreement, actually. 97% of you are saying it is important for children to be taught in a certain way. How they are taught in the classroom is critical. So that's good to know. It means we are in agreement and we are at the same page. And like Samaya said, my name is Faith Ngala. In Zimbabwe, we are supporting a large-scale teacher professional development program, which is seeking to support teachers and senior teachers in teacher professional development, and is funded by the UK aid, the UK government, and it's called Teach. So this is actually what inspired and gave me energy to do this piece of research. And today we are set out to explore how gender-responsive pedagogy implementation is happening in the Zimbabwe schools, and as a strategy to finish strong towards equitable and quality education for all, as enshrined in the big agenda of SDG 4. So we want to understand how the different education reforms and policy commitments which Zimbabwe has are shaping what is happening right into the classrooms and through teachers. And Zimbabwe, as a country, committed a long time ago, some years back, to teaching its learners in a gender-responsive way. And they agreed that this is a strategy which can help us to achieve this big agenda. So before we even go further, it might be good for us to think about what is gender-responsive pedagogy so that we are all on the same page. So let's start with that. Gender-responsive pedagogy is a teaching approach that ensures equal learning opportunities for all learners. And it integrates gender awareness into the classroom practices. It equips teachers with skills and recognizes and addresses the different needs of both boys and girls. So it promotes inclusion and equity in education. And like I've said, Zimbabwe committed itself to do business in that way, to teach its learners in that way. So it is very clear that for Zimbabwe, it understands the big promise, which is in gender-responsive pedagogy, if it is effectively implemented. And effective implementation means that our more than 150,000 teachers in the country are teaching in that way. And it means that every one of our 5 million learners, more than 5 million learners in the country, they are benefiting from this. So when it's implemented effectively, gender-responsive pedagogy, it promotes equity and inclusion. And it improves learning outcomes, through the increased participation of learners. Remember the SDG targets are around lifelong learning and quality education. Gender-responsive pedagogy teaching approaches also supports gender equity across the education systems. So it eliminates all gender disparities and ensures fair access for all children. So you see, it will help us to actually build a resilient and inclusive education system in the country if teachers teach in this gender-responsive way. So this is why I decided as an educationist, as part of the education system, to just be able to look into this issue more. And that is why you can see why even Zimbabwe as a country committed to teach in this way in the classroom. So the commitment is not just for some of the learners, it's for every learner. So that's why even currently our education sector strategic plan enshrines this ambition of equitable and quality education for every child. Partners, FAWE and UNICEF, they've even helped with toolkits for gender-responsive pedagogy implementation. And some education partners have already started supporting teachers and school leaders. We know British Council, we know the Teach program right now in Fawezi, in same subject for girls. They are already doing something. So efforts are clear in terms of quality, equitable education becoming a reality for every child. And even at the highest level, let's remember our Constitution, the Amended Education Act, the National Gender Policy, National Development Strategy 1 and now 2, all of those prioritize equity and quality education. But the big question is every learner benefiting from this? And the big answer is not yet. Because we are at 57.36% towards our SDG 4 indicators as a country, and we only have got 5 years to gallop to the 100% mark. And not just that, in those 5 years, the school-going population, like in any other African country, is going to rise by 50%. And the biggest increase and jump will be in secondary schools, where it is going to almost double. And when it doubles, it is doubling. And when we are already having about 30% of our secondary school learners not completing secondary education. So you can see why it is important for us to be talking about this issue today. So in my research, I sought to just be able to understand if the teachers really know about gender responsive pedagogy. And if they know, are they applying it in the classrooms? And if they are applying, what is allowing them or enabling them to do that? And those who are not applying, what are the biggest challenges they are facing to be able to do that? And during my time as an echidna scholar in the past 6 months, that's what I was focusing on. I had an opportunity to speak to different teachers, 189 of them across 4 provinces. I had to make sure that we have got rural and urban districts. So I had 2 urban and 7 rural. I used a mixed methods approach. So I had some surveys with teachers, focus group discussions with school learners, with communities, with teachers as well, and some interviews with school leaders. And the findings were not what I did not. I expected some good, feedback from the schools. And I wasn't shocked actually with that because I myself, I was educated in rural Zimbabwe. And the commitment of teachers to education has never been anything to doubt in our country. To try and really understand what's happening on the ground, I had to do a systemic analysis for the implementation of gender responsive pedagogy. I did a systemic analysis because teacher professional development and gender responsive pedagogy implementation is a systemic issue. It's a critical lever for any education reform. So I had to look at this issue in that way. And in simple terms, if you want, the factors which affect gender responsive pedagogy implementation in a country can be put into 3 different categories. And in this case, the structural, which refers to the issues of training, policies, material resources, and the relational, which really refers to the school leadership, peer-to-peer relationships for teachers, and then finally the mindsets. Let's talk about the structural factors. Teachers reported mixed understanding of gender responsive pedagogy and training. But the differentiator in all this was training. It was evident that structured training programs deepen teachers' understanding of gender-responsive pedagogy, and it enhances classroom inclusion. Actually, from my sample of 189 students, 189 teachers, 57% of them had received training, and 43% had not received any training. So you could see the difference between those who had received training and those who had not received training. The teachers who had received training could literally be able to articulate clearly, what gender responsive pedagogy is all about. They could talk about the key tenets of gender responsive pedagogy. And even after the training, it was clear that they were implementing. One of the teachers actually in Baitbridge could clearly articulate how they were handling the classroom after the training they had received. And within the training aspect, actually, there's the issue of the classroom practice. So it was very clear that, as the teachers get trained, they are able to implement. But not just training, how they are trained is critical for the teachers. So the teachers spoke about the issue of being allowed or enabled to have school level, teacher professional development groups, communities of practice. That really helps them to implement better. And they continue to learn from each other. I showed you that example of the Baitbridge teacher. It's very clear this was a Form 2 teacher, that this teacher, after being trained, could actually be able to implement what they had learned in terms of articulating all the key tenets of gender responsive pedagogy. In terms of the diverse gender sensitive learning materials, the teachers were very clear that materials which are relevant are quite critical for them to be able to deliver gender responsive pedagogy. They appreciated the material which is already aligned to the curriculum, and they appreciated the textbooks which can help them to deliver better, because they already have those principles already enshrined into the textbooks. That was very helpful. The issue of policy guidance was also the other thing which was very critical for the teachers. And we want to applaud the ministry because on the ground, the policy was there. Circular 2021 of 2024 was in existence, and teachers knew about it. One of the teachers, a grade 3 teacher in Barry Hatfield, actually articulated how they are using that policy to implement gender responsive pedagogy in the classrooms. Then the aspect of barriers and challenges. As much as all these factors were enabling them to do that, to implement gender responsive pedagogy, there were structural challenges as well. And the teachers spoke about the uneven, fragmented, and short-term trainings as a barrier. The training, as much as it's on the ground, not every teacher is getting this training. Actually, I talked about the 43% only have gotten the training from my sample. And they realize that it's mainly donor-driven, so it targets certain teachers and certain people at particular times. And the teachers felt that training should just be for everyone if it's about gender-responsive pedagogy, because it's about every learner. The issue of monitoring was also the other bit of things which really needed to be looked at. As much as we've got the policies to support implementation, these policies haven't been translated into some measurable indicators which will help us with monitoring implementation. And the last bit of things was the inadequate resources, infrastructure shortages. So we end up with big class sizes. And this teacher from Baitbridge actually had to say, sometimes I really want to do it. I've been trained, but manning 60 learners in a ECDB class, that can be very difficult. Let's talk about the relational factors. On relational factors, the key issue actually was just the supportive school leadership, which fosters inclusive cultures through coaching and collaborative learning. So school leaders' role was very critical in GRP implementation. Actually, the teachers acknowledged that the school leader can be the link between them and the community all the time. Because for them to be able to implement gender-responsive pedagogy effectively, the community needs to be part of the journey. And the teacher training methods was a key one. Like I've said, teachers appreciate it when they are trained, but they continue to have an opportunity to learn together, to challenge each other's attitudes and things they've internalized. That really helps them to then become better in their implementation. This school leader from Mutare articulated, this is a teacher from Mutare who articulated how they were engaging with the community through the different prize giving and speech and prize giving days. So which shows how the teachers are so aware when they are trained on how they need to work together with the community. So the learners will do the dramas, and that will help spark conversations with the community. This is a supportive school leader from Tafara, and was articulating how they are implementing and how he is supporting implementation in his school. Talking about the barriers for the relational factors, the bigger issue there was just the issue of deeply ingrained cultural norms and the different beliefs. Remember, learners come from their families and they're part of the community. So whatever they see and experience every day, sometimes it does find its way into the classrooms. And teachers need to continuously talk about that and try to address that. And sometimes there's some resistance as well. Finally, on mindsets. In terms of mindsets, teachers' mindsets were shifting as a result of training and continuous peer-to-peer learning. It helped teachers, when they are trained, their beliefs in children continue to shift. So most of the teachers who were trained, we talked to were very clear that, learners can succeed regardless of their gender. And this teacher from Chipinge articulated the journey they had walked as a teacher in terms of mindset shift, starting from what they believed then before training and what they are now believing as a trained teacher. So in terms of the recommendations, I just have got 4 key recommendations for the Ministry of Primary and Secondary Education and its partners in education, who are all pushing hard towards the SDG 4 finishing line. The first one, which I have, is let's integrate gender-responsive pedagogy into the pre-service curricula so that those teachers who graduate with these skills already. And in service, we need to be able to make sure that this is mandatory and it's structured. We have got some standard modules, assessment tools, and which are all aligned with the curriculum. Remember, we've got a huge opportunity with this, with the heritage-based curriculum, the new curriculum reform process we are going through. We do have a huge opportunity for us to be able to make sure that we align this. And with that, we need a costed National Continuous Professional Development Plan strategy. And this strategy should talk about the financing. How are we going to finance this? What are we going to measure? And let's include the timelines as well. When are we going to train all the teachers? My second recommendation will be around the middle tier. So if you haven't seen the Global Education Monitoring Report on School Leadership for Zimbabwe, Zimbabwe was spotlighted this year. Please look at it. The middle tier is critical, not just the one school leader, but all the leadership team within a school. Remember, schools operate as a whole. And when we look at that, even when we're training the teachers, it's quite critical that we are training all the teachers in a school as a whole, because schools are systems. It's not projects. So when we target on this mid-retire, it helps with the leadership. It's clear that when we have a leader who believes in gender-responsive pedagogy, they ensure that it works and is fully implemented. My third recommendation is on the communities of practice at school level, the way we train teachers. This idea of 3 days, and we send away teachers to go and perform miracles. It is not working for the teachers. Let's ensure that our models we are using to train teachers are models which can help them to continuously learn from each other. And that is what will transform their mindsets, and that is what will support and push implementation at school level, and they feel supported as they support each other. My last recommendation is on the mindsets of teachers. It's not going to happen with these short-term trainings. It's not going to happen overnight. Some teachers have been teaching for more than 20 years, 30 years in the system. So the training we are offering them should be training which continuously help them to learn from each other so that we can be able to implement gender-responsive pedagogy effectively. And so all those who have joined us today, the believers of education like me in the room, our policymakers, the holders of the purses, those who have got the money and the resources, there is so much hope in implementing gender-responsive pedagogy. There is so much hope in centering teachers. There is so much hope in centering teacher professional development and providing the teachers with the resources they need to make inclusive classrooms. It is for every learner. And we need to ensure that whatever we are doing is for every learner and is for every teacher. And then our big dream or our big vision, which we have with SDG 4 by 2030, can be able to become a reality. So thank you so much for this time, and back to you, Samaya.
Excuse me. Thank you, Faith, for sharing the very important work you've been doing over the past few months here at Brookings. I would now like to invite our first discussant, Antara Ganguly. I see you're here. Please turn on your camera when you can. Antara has been the head of the UNGAI Secretariat since 2021. And prior to this role, she has led the gender portfolio for UNICEF India, UNICEF's largest non-humanitarian office, where she led programs on addressing harmful gender norms in education and health systems. And previously, she served as the deputy representative for UN Women in Bangladesh. And before joining the UN, Antara worked in the private sector as a management consultant. Antara started her career as a teacher in a municipal school in Pune, India, that served children of sex workers. Antara holds an MA in International Economics from the Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies and a BA in English Literature and Developmental Psychology from Amherst College. Antara, welcome, and thank you so much for being with us today. You bring a richness of experience and knowledge of the gender equality agenda globally. And given your extensive work, could you help us situate Faith's research within this broader global conversation around gender responsive education and the role of teachers in achieving gender equality?
Thank you so much, Samaya, and thank you so much, Faith, for the amazing work you've done and the immense commitment to children, education, and to gender equality. I really enjoyed what you shared, and it was very thoughtfully presented. Thank you. I'm going to start with a couple of questions for us to reflect. If you can think back to a moment in your childhood where someone made you feel like you can't do something because of your gender. Someone said to you, come home, it's dark. You can't stay out that late. Go and help someone in the kitchen. And the same was not being said to your brother or your male cousin. Do you remember looking at a textbook when you were a kid and thinking, why are all the farmers men when I look out of the window, what I see are women working in the fields? Did you ever have a teacher who was not promoted, even though she was by far the best teacher in the school? Did you ever wonder growing up why most of the school principals were men while the teachers were women. It's 2025, and sadly, I think many of us will still answer yes to these questions. And the reason is because we were not taught gender equality, and our schools didn't promote gender equality. In fact, the curricula that many of us had actually promoted negative stereotypes about women and men and all people. Harmful gendered norms and stereotypes have the power to make or actually to break a child's life, including their access to and completion of education. Even today, in a lot of DHS surveys in many, many countries, including in countries where boys are out of school more than girls, a majority of respondents do believe that it's okay for a man to beat his wife if she burns dinner. So just going to school is clearly not enough, and that's where Faith's incredible work on gender responsive pedagogy comes in. Also, to address Melissa, my dear friend Melissa's comment in the chat, I think this is transformative pedagogy. I would call it gender transformative pedagogy because it's transforming harmful norms, whatever we may call it for political expediency on the ground. Gender transformative pedagogy not only supports education systems to end harmful norms, it can also gender-based violence in and through schools and on the way to school. And we do have the evidence. Evidence shows that gender transformative education, I'm going to call it GTE, has an incredibly high rate of investment, return on investment. And its impact on the learning of children goes on for decades. This is what Angai has been doing. We are currently partnering with ministries of education, civil society, young feminist activists, and schools in 11 countries in West and Central Africa and 2 countries in South Asia to put gender equality at the heart of national education systems. And we have seen incredible impact. In our multi-country program to end gender stereotypes through schools, through play-based curricula, in just a few months, we found that children learn very quickly to question and reject stereotypes. For example, at baseline, when we looked at girls who associate the word cooking with both boys and girls, within a few months, that how much they associated with both genders went up 5-fold. For boys, it went up 7-fold. For girls and boys, when we asked them if they would associate the word home repair with all genders, we measured a 3-fold increase. Evidence shows that it's possible, and Faith's presentation also showed that, to shift teachers' attitudes with the right interventions and support. In fact, one of the teachers we supported said, "Never before could we have had such conversations about gender equality, transgender people, and child marriage. I now make more sense of the impact of gender inequality. We need to clean and change our spectacles and our vision, not those of others first. I've cleaned my spectacles and I will take this vision to wherever I go next." Now, this teacher is from India and she's talking about transgender people and child marriage. India actually has very supportive laws on support recognizing transgender people. It's one of the 3 genders recognized in the country, and also forbids marriage of all children below the age of 18. However, those are just laws. And as all of us on this call know, implementation is much harder than just framing the law. So this teacher who's now making that connection that actually mistreatment of transgender people or continuation of child marriage is because of gender inequalities, because of patriarchy, this teacher is now going to be able to work on this in a very different way, as she says herself. We've also drawn global evidence from initiatives in those 11 countries. Some of them focus on primary to secondary school students and some on early childhood education. All aim to shift knowledge and attitudes about gender stereotypes. Some of this evidence shows programming to end gender stereotypes with gender transformative pedagogy works in a surprisingly short period of time, but we do need further measurement to understand scale and lifelong impact. It is critical to engage the whole school for success. It cannot just be the students and the teachers. Parents have to be involved. Principals have to be supportive. Sometimes the district cadres also have to be involved. Measurement always is key. All this to say, gender transformative education and pedagogy are urgent, and we believe that they are life-saving. I mean that. I think gender transformative pedagogy, or any content that helps children and adults to question and reject harmful norms, will save all of our lives. They solve problems. They are key to high quality education, girls' education, preventing boys' disenfranchisement and toxic masculinities, functioning labor markets, and equal, just, and peaceful societies. Perhaps if the leaders of the world today who are trying to negotiate peace for wars that are 2, 3, 4 years old, if they had had gender transformative education, we would have not had those wars in the first place. I celebrate you, Faith, for undertaking this very important research in Zimbabwe. Feminist researchers like you lead the way. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Antara, for excuse me, your thought-provoking insights and for giving us so much to reflect on, especially around the importance of embedding gender transformative education and gender responsive pedagogy at the heart of education systems. And given that the barriers that children and especially girls face are so deeply systemic. And thank you as well for sharing the evidence on how gender transformative education and gender responsive pedagogy can make a difference in the lives of young people. I would like to invite our second panelist, Elvis Chitsungu, to join us on screen. Elvis is the director of the Education Coalition of Zimbabwe, where he leads strategic direction and advocacy to influence national education policy and financing. With over 15 years of experience in government and NGO sectors, he holds a Master's of Education and has previously held leadership roles at Higher Life Foundation. His work focuses on inclusive and equitable education, education in emergencies, lifelong learning, and digital innovation. Elvis actively engages in multi-stakeholder dialogues, parliamentary work, and international forums to promote evidence-based solutions for quality education in Zimbabwe. Elvis, thank you so much for being with us today. We really look forward to learning from your experience and your deep knowledge of the national policy and implementation space in Zimbabwe. So we've just heard how Faith's research fits into the broader global conversation on gender transformative education and gender responsive education and the role of teachers in achieving gender equality. Can you help us understand how Faith's research fits into the local policy context in Zimbabwe?
Thank you very much. I would want to say, well done, Faith. This is an incredible research that you have done. And obviously, this research is going to really assist us, particularly as we advocate for policies that are gender responsive and of course, inclusive in terms of the pedagogy. Now, in as far as we are concerned, I think this is a very important research in the sense that is actually going to address, universal education challenges that no country has fully resolved this particular, issue. I'm sure when we talk of gender responsive, we are really making sure that we have got equality among the boy and the girl child. And at the same time, we are actually responding to their needs. And with this particular research, as far as we are concerned in terms of advocacy, I think if we are to consider the global commitments that we currently have, and that we are actually advocating for within the education system in Zimbabwe, looking at the Sustainable Development Goal number 4, and looking at the UNESCO Education 2030, and not forgetting the African Union, the Continental Education Strategy for Africa. All these, they actually drive towards the inclusion of pedagogy as a vital entity in the teaching and learning, particularly in the classrooms. And of course, not forgetting, of course, the teacher competency that we are actually advocating for. Now, if we are to consider these global commitments, we tend to see that these are really a cornerstone for achieving inclusive, equitable, and access to quality education. Hello, I don't know whether you still hear me because I've got some network challenges here.
Yeah, we can hear you. We can hear you, Elvis.
Samaya?
Yeah, we can hear you. We can hear you okay, Elvis.
It looks like it's raining and we have got challenges here. So I was talking about the global commitments, that we the global commitments that we're currently trying to drive. And I'm saying with this particular research is actually, actually advocating, for the inclusion of gender in the teaching and learning, particularly in our schools. And at the same time, the teacher capacity development that they have to, actually have in order for them to deliver and achieve, of course, inclusive, equitable, and access to quality education. What we are saying here is that these experiences that the researchers brought are really practical models that we can actually adopt, as Ministry of Primary and Secondary Education, and of course, try to include gender inclusiveness in the teaching and learning. We know that, the aspect of gender has really had some challenges. And if we are to look at, of course, the post-COVID-19, when we had, losses in learning, this really affected so many countries. But of course, with the coming in of gender responsiveness and, of course, the pedagogy, abilities, we tend to see to it that we tend to also have
Have we lost Elvis?
It seems, Samaya, we have lost Elvis given his connection. Okay. But it seems he had covered quite a lot of what he wanted to say in terms of the commitments and how this can be able to help us to push towards those commitments.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. I think we can wait for a few seconds and see if he's able to join us again. And if folks have questions, please continue to put them in the chat. And Faith, is there a way for us to reach Elvis? All right, so as we...
He's confirming that the network is down and he's trying to reorganize himself. So I'm sure we can be able to move on to the questions for now.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, great. Thank you. So as we wait for Elvis to join us, I'd like to thank Antara If you have some time to stick around for the Q&A portion of the session, please do. And I can move us to the Q&A portion. I see a lot of questions coming in. So perhaps you can join us on screen, Antara. And we can start with a question from Sarah. Oh no, that was just a comment. Apologies. All right, I see a question from Munyaradzi. Munyaradzi is asking how we can support the societies and the communities to understand the efforts of teachers in gender-responsive pedagogy. Faith or Antara, please feel free to jump in.
I can share a couple of really nice stories. So in one case, this was a very poor district, a poor minority district in India. And one of the boys, he's 10 years old, his mom came to the school and told my colleague Zainab that her son came home and he insisted on helping her in the kitchen and sweeping the house. And when his father told him, you know, why are you doing that? That's not what boys don't have to do that. He turned to his father and said, you should be doing this too, because you're eating the food and you're living in the house and so on and so forth. And he convinced his father, in fact. And now both his parents are very proud of him. There was another case where there was a girl who wanted to wear track pants because she was playing sports. And this is not a community in which girls wear Western clothes at all. The boys, by the way, of course do, but not the girls. And her parents just completely supported her. And as she did sort of better and better in sports and began to be at a representational level, her village became really proud of her. And this was a pretty conservative Muslim community. So it's not nothing. Now, these are anecdotal, right? I mean, you don't hear the cases where the parents were very unhappy about this. And I'm acknowledging that up front. But I do think that this is being able to bring parents along is critical. And we have to start by assuming good intent. If we go in there assuming these parents are backwards, these parents are not going to agree, the faith leaders are going to be this, that, we are sort of setting ourselves up for failure. There will be barriers. We don't have to imagine them and sort of come up with them ourselves. They will show up. But in a lot of cases, I have continually been surprised, especially by mothers, how much they embrace their children doing something differently. At the end of the day, nobody wants more for their kids or loves those kids more than the parents in almost all cases. So we're able to sort of show that actually this is really great for your kid. This is really great for your kid's future. They can be really supportive. But like I said, there are also many, many examples where it doesn't go well. And there is backlash. So I don't want to pretend that it's just a rosy picture.
Indeed, Antara. So the backlash can be there. And Munyarazi, from the research and the schools we visited and the communities we managed to speak to, it was clear that that can be work in progress. When there's that intentionality of the school wanting to work with the community, so that whatever is happening in the school system also is the same efforts are reflected with working with the community. Teachers shared examples of how they are doing that with the community. For example, that example for the teacher was talking about speech and prize giving days. So at speech and prize giving days, students are doing poems, they're doing drama. Now, a girl is doing the other roles the leadership, which they are not usually doing in the home. And the parents are watching that drama. And that is what is sparking conversation. And like, okay, so that was the doctor. That girl was the doctor in the drama. And they start talking about that. Or the boy was, as a father, was, acting as doing the dishes, doing the other chores. And then that sparks conversation so that whatever is the learners are learning, the community also starts talking about them. So it continues to be work in progress, but there need to be deliberate efforts in engaging the communities. And whatever the content is, well, we are trying to push and spark conversations with should be contextually appropriate and also acknowledging the context in which these children are coming from. Then slowly and softly push some of those, societal norms and beliefs.
Great, thank you. So another question is about pre-service teacher education. So Faith, perhaps you can take this. People are asking about opportunities for scaling GRP into pre-service teacher education in Zimbabwe. So I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that.
Indeed, I have thoughts, Samaya, because this is one of my recommendations that we need to be able to reform somehow the pre-service curriculum and ensure that gender responsive pedagogy, transformative education, these skills, they are already incorporated into the pre-service curricula. That way, we will have a fresh pipeline of teachers who graduate with these schools already, so that they are not just getting them in service. And I know that the higher and tertiary curriculum for teachers, it has just been reviewed. And we have also reviewed the education curriculum. So it seems we do have a big opportunity as we are starting the new cycle of implementing these reformed curriculums for both the higher and tertiary for the teachers and for the for the learners in education. So it is something we can work towards as a country, and that will help us a lot in terms of ensuring that every teacher has the skill. Thank you, Samai.
Great, thanks. And Antara, are there any best practices on pre-service teacher training you'd like to share or highlight with us? For us?
I think our experience overall, and we do this kind of training at many levels. We do it specifically for teachers. I also put in a response to Sarah and her question on Niger. We do a lot of work with ministry colleagues too. And then we've worked also with communities in some programs on ending gender-based violence. It has to be personally meaningful. We don't find it useful to just sort of put terms on a blackboard and say, this is gender, this is sex, gender is a biological concept. That doesn't mean anything. But if you start talking about, think about your daughter and your son getting up in the morning, getting dressed, eating, going to school. What are they thinking about and why is it different? And then you slowly approach the question of, is your son thinking about being safe from sexual violence on the way to school? Is your daughter thinking about it? So that's sort of, and then, Amy, there's no girl in the world who is not worried about being harassed, like literally anywhere in the world, right? You always think about what you're going to wear in the morning based on where you're going to go. Men and boys don't do that in most cases. So this sort of personally transformative way, I feel like it grabs attention and it helps people realize that this is something in my life. I think the other thing that's really important, and it's important to do it sensitively, is recognize the intersectionality of gender identity. So, for example, to put it into context that yes, so let me put it another way. When we work with West African when we have worked with West African men leaders from ministries of education, sometimes they come into a gender workshop being quite defensive, like, oh, I support girls' education, but sometimes I feel like it's gone too far. Women are doing too many things, blah, blah, blah. Then we talk to them about the wheel of privilege, and we begin to talk about what is it like for you as a Black man to go to France? What does it feel like at Charles de Gaulle Airport? Do you feel like you're spoken to the same way? So sort of helping them to reflect on being Black in a world that is still very racist. It helps them to put it in context, So we all have some privileges based on our identity, and we all have some absence of privileges and vulnerabilities. And being able to see that, I think, also helps to open up people's ability to even be open to the idea of having privileges, because sometimes, especially men, but sometimes women too, are just very defensive about having privileges. So to be reminded that everybody has vulnerabilities too based on identity can be very helpful.
Great. Thank you, Antara, and thank you, Faith. So we have time to take one last question. And Faith, there's a question on, wins and pockets of promise, right? So I'm curious if you can share with our participants today where you're seeing wins towards these changes and where the bottlenecks are, and what will it take to tip the scale towards action?
It's a mouthful and a critical question as well. Yes, indeed, there are pockets of good practice. Like I've said, I had no doubt that teachers are already doing something in the schools, and exactly that. Where the training has been done properly, like structured, formal, long enough, and the model allows teachers to continuously learn from each other, and it's not just targeted on one teacher per school and expect them to do miracles for the whole school. This is working. And where teachers do have the resources to implement, they've got the textbooks, the class sizes also are in a way that are manageable. The school leaders are supporting, they are actively engaging their community. The gender responsive pedagogy implementation is there and is evident. And you can see from what the teachers and the school leaders were reporting. I think what it will take to tip the scale is scaling this up, learning from the evidence of what is working, learning from those schools and districts and provinces where this is being done properly, and find a way to scale it up across the board. And scaling up will require a lot of system support. Our districts cannot just do it that by themselves. We need that structured way of scaling it up. And that's why we're talking about the pre-service, thinking about the teachers who join the system. And in service, can we have a proper strategy to support teachers? And with clarity of when are we going to do that? Where are we going to get the resources? Who is going to do that? Standardized modules. That is what can help us to do this at speed and ensure that quality and equity is for every child, not just for a few.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much, Faith. And thank you, Antara, for your participation and for sharing your insights with us. Unfortunately, Elvis was unable to rejoin due to network issues. And I know there are many more questions we couldn't get to, but we will have a very lively discussion in our breakout rooms. So now we're going to move to that portion of the workshop. But before we open the rooms, let me just very quickly explain how this will work. So my colleagues will assign you to a room, and each room will have a facilitator and a note taker. And you'll be guided by a couple of discussion questions in each room. And after that, we will come back to this main room to hear from your very, very interesting discussions that I'm sure you'll have. And so please enjoy the conversations, and we'll see you back here shortly. Nika? All right, welcome back, everyone. I hope you had rich conversations in your groups. The conversation in my group or my room was very, very enriching. Folks resonated with Faith's research, and especially the framework of her findings and how, the structural, relational components work together, and how mindsets also come into play. And we talked about how, that works in different contexts and workspaces as well. And we also talked about like context and politics, and how both influence teachers' motivation to implement gender responsive pedagogy. I would like to invite the facilitators from each group to share a 1-minute summary of the key points that emerged in your discussions. And I encourage everyone maybe to come on screen, turn your camera on, but please remain muted unless you're speaking. So perhaps we can get started, and we'll begin with room 1.
Thank you, Samaya. Room 1 was for us. In our room also, there was a very interesting conversation. I think there were folks mainly from Zimbabwe and one from Kenya, East Africa. So they resonated with the findings. They felt like this represents what is exactly happening on the ground in like your group, that different structural, relational, and the mindsets issue was the big issue, which they were also pushing, that it has to be a continuous process of supporting the teachers, and it needs to be a systemic kind of process to be able to do that for every teacher. But there was a very clear recommendation on, as we're thinking of institutionalizing and everything, we need to think about the resources. So they appreciated the Ecozy coming on board because they are doing the budget analysis for Zimbabwe, that we need to look at the gender responsive budget as we are thinking about it, that if we want to transform the education system in this way, we need resources. So let's push for the money. And then the issue of practical guides, which are clearly aligned to the heritage-based curriculum, because it already enshrines the values, the cultural values of the different communities. So if we align to the curriculum, it makes it much easier for us. Then accountability mechanisms was the other one, which was really magnified, that let's have the accountability mechanisms very clearly. We already have got the inspection framework. Let's have some of these indicators on gender clearly defined, and inspections should monitor as well implementation of gender responsive teaching in the classrooms. As lessons are observed, let's make sure they are observing all those aspects as well. And the last one is about Africa as a whole. This research, they are hoping that it can not just help Zimbabwe, but help Africa as a whole, because the issues are exactly the same. So yes, the research will be available. It's going to be a policy brief, which will be published and can be helpful to the continent as a whole. Thanks, Samaya. That was room 1.
Thank you, Faith. Room 2, Rachel?
Yes, thank you so much, Samaya. Room 2, we had diverse. We had UK, Kenya, Zimbabwe, Zambia, and Argentina. And what was coming out is that, of course, most of them do agree with the presentation of Faith, even if the context might have been different. But key issues which are coming is that, of course, there's been already this research which was done in Kenya. And the question is the hurdle of scaling. What solutions are there to be scaling, and what does the cost look like? And what is the evidence for it to be scalable? I think those are some of the key things that we're reflecting. And then we've also had key themes in terms of it's critical, like one of the, it's good that we've noticed that this gap has now been given this evidence for it to really be taken as a serious issue. And we can, and then there's a lot that requires to be done, specifically in the Zimbabwean context. So more importantly, there's agreement, even if the contexts vary. And secondly, is that there's need to really look at the scalability and the costs of that in terms of the recommendations for the GRP approach. And we also had just people sharing, like from the context of Zimbabwe, the recommendation of the COP peer-to-peer learning, that GRP is just not an individual awareness, but systematic change, which will just allow just individuals from teachers, school leaders to co-design strategies to ensure consistency across schools. So these were some of the themes that came from Group 2. Over to you, Samaya.
Thank you, Rachel. And last but not least, room 3, Betty.
Yes, I'll be sharing our discussion, but we had very similar thoughts, and I saw some folks in our breakout rooms nodding along when the other groups were sharing out. So I won't repeat some of the things that were said, but for the first, applying it to our context, a lot of people had similar things that were being raised, that as practitioners, we know often the change that needs to be made, but we face a lot of restriction from the system. So thinking of Faith's framework of this, thinking about the system and making those changes and incorporating that was something that a lot of people resonated with. And I think we also talked about how we are 5 years away from the target date of the SDG goals, and thinking through that this conversation is not new, but we need to be thinking of these different issues and thinking of them not as silos, but as a together framework as Faith is presenting. So that really resonated with people in the breakout rooms. And then also in our breakout room, we had a question about what's working on everybody's context, and what are things that what Faith is saying that is already working for well, people are recognizing that's already working. And peer-to-peer learning, as Rachel said, that's something that also came up in our group as very effective. And also thinking about the why. So why are teachers being put into this professional development, and thinking through ways if we can get rid of those silos. So not just thinking about that this is gender transformative, this is something that can be integrated in other teacher professional development as well. And the last note that came up in our breakout rooms is, while a lot of times it is narratives, how Faith is saying, and sometimes using technical terms can push people away from thinking about the true essence of what's trying to be pushed. So I think Antara was also saying something similarly, that the teachers and the parents often want what's best for their child, but sometimes these technical terms can shy them away from the good work that's happening. So thinking about what terms can be used in the context that's more familiar to the communities we're trying to impact. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anya, and thank you all for your engagement in the breakout room discussions. As we're starting to wrap up today's workshop, I'd love to invite Faith to share a few closing remarks. Faith, the floor is yours.
Indeed. Thank you, Samaya. Colleagues, this is just to say thank you very much for making the time. I know this has been an interesting journey with Center for Universal Education here at the Brookings as an Echidna scholar. So there's been a lot of, discussions and learning from other contexts and learning from other researches. But back home in Zimbabwe, the team which has been supporting me in data collection, data analysis, and the conversations, all that, I really am grateful for that. And those who have come today and your inputs in the breakaway rooms, we're going to consolidate that and make sure that it informs, the final policy brief, which will be published in some few months to come. So, yeah, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. We look forward to the final policy brief, and I'm hoping that whatever evidence which we have on the ground in this policy brief will help the government of Zimbabwe and other African countries to really, accelerate the pace of making education meaningful for every child. And what we are seeing is that it requires everyone. It requires the teachers being centered, but it requires the communities. It requires the system, the whole system, really, pushing this and making sure that it's scaled up. Even other teacher professional development programs, how do they center this gender responsiveness to make sure that learning is meaningful for every child? So I'm hoping that this evidence can add to the broader conversations which are already going, but continue to keep the hope in education and not give up. I know a lot of changes are happening in the international aid space, in the education funding space, but we can't give up on children. We need to continue to do the best we can. So any modalities which are going to help us to catapult us to the finishing line, we are hanging on them. And in this case, the gender transformative education can catapult us to the finishing line by 2030. Thank you so much, Samaya.
Thank you, Faith. And I'd like to echo you and thank the participants for joining us today. And we hope to see you again. There's another virtual workshop led by Rachel Kalaba starting in just 30 minutes. And we have 2 more happening tomorrow. Rachel will present her work on girls' leadership and in Zimbabwe. In Zambia, apologies. And she proposes an indigenous approach to leadership development. Excuse me. It's really cold here in DC. You can find more information and register for these workshops on the symposium event page. And if I can ask my colleagues to drop the link in the chat. And a final reminder that the deadline to apply for the 2026 Echidna Global Scholars Fellowship is December 15th. The link is already there. Yes, thank you very much, Nika. Thank you again, and we hope to see you again soon.